expertise. All right, so I think we're about ready to go into our first instructional, I think, Grant. And this should be Anthony, and Anthony ready with showing off some of the things that he's building, and giving you some ideas and tips and tricks on how you can do something similar. So over to you, Anthony. This is how you build a Remloc helmet.
Hello Lavecon and greetings commanders. My name's Anthony Hunt. I'm a long-time fan of Elite and author of the Elite Dangerous blog. Earlier this year I got myself a 3D printer. Now there are two main types of 3D printers and resin printers. I opted to buy a resin printer. Now, after I got my printer, I did a few initial prints, the standard test print called the Rook, and then I started looking for other things I could print. I found a site called Thingiverse, which had a giant collection of models and included some Elite spaceships. So, having drawn them, I thought it would be quite interesting to print them. That's a whole different project. In the case of my first major project, I wanted to see if I could make a Remloc helmet, either as a prop or better still as a wearable cosplay item. And I found a model on Thingiverse created by Commander Antonia Bradley, who's a retired physicist. She had both the model online and a YouTube video describing her build process. So I then started in on this. When I started printing the Remloc helmet, the first thing I did was print out the chin section and jaw part, and then the ear muffs, so that I could assemble the main frame of the thing to see how big it was and whether I could actually fit it in my printer, because as I said, the print volume is 19 centimeters by 12 centimeters by 20 centimeters. So anything I print has to be smaller than that. When 3D printing with resin, the printer's print bed is submerged into a vat of photopolymer resin and positioned 5 nanometers or 0.05 of a millimeter above the bottom of the vat. A pattern is displayed, or a slice of a model on an LCD screen. In the case of my printer, it's a 4K screen, and then a bank of UV lights under the screen is turned on. This causes the resin to solidify onto the build plate. The build plate then is raised up and dropped back down again, another 5 nanometers or 0.05 millimeters above where it was before, and then the next layer is exposed. This process repeats, each layer taking roughly 10 seconds, and 4,000 or 5,000 layers later, and 13 hours or so, you have a completed model. And once I'd got all the bits I needed for the main section around my head, I then glued them together with more resin. There's a technique called resin welding, where you simply place some of the uncured resin onto two parts of a model, and then using a UV flashlight expose it, and it bonds the two pieces together like they were one piece. Then I had to choose whether or not to print the visor in clear resin or to print a solid opaque resin mould and then vacuum form the visor over the top of that mould template. Now I had a look at eBay to see if I could find some vacuum forming equipment, and it was hard to come by and quite expensive, so I thought I would have a go at printing clear resin. So while I waited for my bottle of clear resin to arrive in the post, I painted the Remloc that I've done so far using the game concept art as a template. Once the clear resin has arrived, what I needed to do was test run how well I could make clear, visually clear models So as a smaller project, I created some Resident Evil T-Virus containers, as this was a model I found on Thingiverse, and being as I'm a collector of film props, it seemed rather appropriate. What I found with experimentation was, provided you sanded in ever increasing levels of grit the surface of the model, you could get it glass smooth, and then with a small coating of varnish, transparent gloss lacquer, that would leave you with a permanent shiny transparent surface. When it came to printing the visor, it was almost twice as big as my available print area. So the only way I could resin print the visor would be to cut the model in half. So using Windows 3D Builder, I sliced the model and put some location pins and holes in the edge of the visor so that I could match up the two halves. I then proceeded to print the first half of one, which took a good 13 hours, and I then printed the back half so that I could get an idea of the size and fit. Unfortunately, I printed the right half of the back when I printed the left half of the front, so I couldn't even get the two halves to pinch together. I then proceeded to print the other side of the back dome, and leaving it running overnight, it ran out of resin, which means I had to abandon the print that I'd done and throw it away. And at that point I also ran out of resin, so I had to order some more and then wait a few days. Once the new resin arrived, I started printing the front half on the other side, and on completion of that I was able to compare the two halves, one having been sanded and lacquered and the other not, which is a sort of before and after view. The process for getting the visor as optically clear as I could was to wet sand, starting with 80 grit sandpaper and going up to 200 grit, 400 grit, 800 grit, 1000 grit, 2000 grit, and then 3000 grit. And that was laborious. Once the two halves were printed and sanded and varnished, I was able to then resin weld the two halves together, creating a full front section of the visor. I then mounted that to the main body, and the results were pretty impressive. It really did start to come together quite well. Now, because the visor is too large to fit into the helmet with the headband over, I hadn't glued the headband in place. So I took that out, put the visor in, checked the seating, and then put the headband on top. The next day I got the rear dome other half finished and got that together, and with the two halves taped together with a bit of sticky tape, I was able to try the visor on, and it fit, even with the head as big as mine. So then it was a case of resin welding the second section at the back and putting the two halves together. I had managed to obtain some fairy lights for a different project, and they were small fairy lights with a compact battery pack, and I thought they might work quite well as a lighting for the headband section of the helmet, because it's supposed to have blue lights in the earmuffs and some kind of LED strip across the headband. So I had a go at that with some success, but I think it needs a diffuser to finish it properly. To complete the helmet, it needs foam collar and neck piece and chin piece, but unfortunately Commander Antonia Bradley hadn't posted the information on these foam templates. Unfortunately, due to a set of circumstances in lockdown, she was in one location and her templates for the foam were in a different location. So she managed to obtain a paper set of these templates for me and sent them via the mail. so that I could complete the project. Obstacle number 2 was that apparently with lockdown, every man and his dog are making cosplay, so that cosplay style foam is almost unobtainable. It's taken almost 4 weeks for the foam to arrive, which it finally has, and I now have some 5 and 10mm foam ready to finish off the helmet. Now that I had the template and the foam, I could begin finishing the helmet. Because I didn't want to destroy the original templates that Antonio so kindly sent me, I redrew the template stencils using CorelDRAW. I could then print multiple copies that were then quite expendable. I could cut them up. So I cut out all the pieces, pinned them to some foam, and then marked out where I had to cut. Then using a nice breadboard, cut out the foam bits and contact adhesive them to the resin helmet base. I did this in several pieces because I had to wait in each case for the glue to dry sufficiently so that I could move on to the next bit. I started with the interior and put in the inner neck section and the 2 cheek pieces, and then the section under the chin which kind of flaps about. I didn't want to actually fix that in because you have to sort of push your head through that gap when you're putting the helmet on. And then finally the more complex bit was the outer foam, which was the thicker 10mm foam, and I had to take that and not only cut out the piece but also sculpt it to a degree and try and sand the bits that I'd cut smooth, which wasn't straightforward. They tended to sort of rough up and bobble a bit, but I got that okay looking, and then using lots and lots of clamps, clamped that to the rest of the helmet and waited for it to dry. Once that had finished drying and seemed to be fairly well on there, I put the visor and dome section and head section on there to have a look, using the clamp as a tripod to hold it up off the head of my dummy. I then placed it on the table to have a look, and as you can see I rotate the helmet around and you can have a look at how far it's got. I haven't done any of the electronics yet. That's, along with gluing the visor to the base of the helmet, is going to be the sort of final phase of the project. Thanks for your time, Lavecon. I hope you found this a little bit interesting, my construction of the Remloc helmet. Enormous thanks to Commander Antonio Bradley for not only helping the construction but also creating the model and publishing it in the first place. So goodbye, Commanders, from me and from Brian, and see you in the void.
Right, we are joined live with Anthony Hunt to answer any of your questions. I know that we have one already, which is what's the make and model of your printer? There's been a load of love and impressed people in the chat over your current model on the Remloc. A lot of people that would be looking to make some kind of orders with you in the future if they could. Oh, is that it there? Oh, look at that. I mean, it looks amazing. That really is really super impressive. And how long has that taken you to get it to this stage? Uh huh. Was he? Hold on. There we go.
Everything he's just been saying has not been heard.
Well, start again then. Right. Sorry, Anthony. That's just me being being inept with a big red button sitting next to me. Now you're broadcasting. You know that bit where I say mics are off air? Yeah, I forgot to put it back on air. Right. If you could just explain again for everybody what the make and model of your printer is, and if you put a wee, if you type it into the chat as well, I'll copy and paste it in so that everyone that's on the various different social medias can look it up correctly, because I can't spell for toffee, that's for sure.
Okay, the printer is an Elegoo Saturn, which is what's classed as a mid-sized resin printer. It has a resin tank that prints 19 centimeters by 12 centimeters, and the model can rise out of the tank 20 centimeters. So that's the total build volume.
Fantastic. And yes, yeah. Well, that's the first strike today. And then I think I get 3 strikes, and then I get replaced by Simon. He has to come up here and take over, so I might just get him out of the way early. Right, and then we were just looking at this stunning Remloc helmet. That is.
Yeah, I have to be careful turning it, because at the moment the visor isn't glued in place. So if I waggle it around too much, everything will fall apart. But you've got the foam at the back is sculpted, and I need to prime that and then paint it black, and then add electronics to the earmuffs so that you've got a little blue LED in there. And if I can find the right LED to go in the headband, then that'll light the visor from above. Someone else, is it heavy? It is quite heavy because it's solid resin. I would say it probably weighs about 1 kilo, all told. I mean, even the visor parts are quite heavy because they are solid resin. So let's put that down, not drop it.
And fantastic. Now, I'm aware of many people who have live streamed 3D printing, and I'm hyper aware at the time it can take. So, how many hours have you sunk into this?
Ooh, crikey. Well, each of the quarters of the visor, those parts, were a print each, and I had one fail, so there's 5 prints. Each one of those took about 12 hours and was about £7 worth of resin, so that give you a sort of a ballpark idea. And then most of the other parts of the Remloc printed in a single print from grey resin, and took again about sort of 12 hours. So I would say 20 to 30 pounds worth of resin there at most.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just thinking about the timescales, and I remember when these this fad of 3D printing started, and I'm thinking, it's just a fad. I'm not really interested. You know, I can't be bothered. I get annoyed if my print job takes more than 2 minutes for the paper to come out. So I've not got the patience for it. But however, now when you're beginning to see where that technology has gone and the quality, I mean, printing clear resin is just unbelievable. It's stunning.
When you think that all of that, apart from the foam, came out of bottles of just liquid, this goo that you pour in the vat, and then it just rises out of it. And it is quite incredible to see, and the diversity of things that it creates. I'm chucking some of these into the
oh wow,
raffle, and they are fridge magnets. They're only small, the size of a domino, but obviously you can see they are sculpted, so there really is an orange sidewinder poking out of the.
Those are stunning. I see there's a question. Is there a reason you printed the transparent parts in 2 pieces with the seam down the middle rather than in 3, where you could position the seams around the edges of the front panel?
Really, I was trying to do it in the least number of pieces. I'm a rookie at 3D printing anyway, and the only modelling software I had to slice up the pieces, the original design that Antonio Bradley put onto Thingiverse, was using Windows 10 3D Builder. So I just sort of took that and went, right, okay, 50-50, slice it down the middle, 2 parts, save those 2 parts, load them into the 3D print slicer, and then print them out. So that was the way I did it. I didn't want to make things overcomplicated.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem that you have to think quite carefully about your plans. And is this something that then becomes that never-ending project where you finish that one and then you think, I could do this bit better, I'm going to change it and do it again, but this way? Is that what's going to happen?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as you can see behind me, all the ships on the wall, those are all 3D models that are affixed to blueprint posters I created and then put a magnetic backing on. So all the ships can be plucked off the wall and dusted or played with. They're all to the same scale. So
Yeah, I
I did
mean,
that.
that looks stunning behind you. That really is. I mean, I'm sure there'll be a lot of people watching who'll be thinking, where do I get that? How can I get a hold of those?
Well, I say the website Thingiverse, which I'll type into the chat here.
Fantastic. Well, while you do that, we have got a couple of more questions. Can your printer use recycled plastic too, or is it resin only?
It's resin only. There are different types of resin. There's standard resin, which you have to clean with isopropyl alcohol and then expose to UV light to effectively bake it, or they call curing it. They do water washable resin, which sounds more eco-friendly, but actually isn't. It's still smelly and toxic. It's just that you use water instead of isopropyl to wash it. They have started making eco resins, but they are at the moment quite expensive, a lot more expensive than standard resins. And also people don't know how well the material stands up over time after it's been 3D printed. You know, does it start to sort of decompose, or we don't know yet. So, but I know that with filament printing, which is the other type of 3D printing, you can recycle the filament, whereas unfortunately with the resin printing, things like the support structures that you have to tear off have to be thrown away and disposed of. They're not recyclable.
All right, I mean, I've just seen that Crowley's asking if it's worth explaining the difference between the resin and the spool 3D printing. But I think it might be if we challenged it, because obviously you made a choice to go for the resin over the spool 3D printing.
Yeah, I mean, my choice was because the resin, although it can only print things that are a lot smaller, and it's more expensive, and to say you've got the whole cleaning aspect with the isopropyl and so on, it produces exceedingly detailed models. The 8-inch screen with a mono screen on my printer, which is effectively what is the template for each layer that's printed, is a 4K screen, and it's only an 8-inch screen. So the level of detail, I don't know how well you better see this on the camera, but this print here is a calibration print.
Oh yeah, look at this sort of
And you
small, fine
can
detail.
see, I mean, if you compare that, you can see it on the palm of my hand, how small that is. It is really tiny, and the level of detail on there is extraordinary. And you couldn't get that with a filament printer. The process is a lot more like a sort of a cross between a toothpaste and an Etch-a-Sketch. It squirts out liquid plastic that comes out an extruder tool from a spaghetti string of PLA or ABS plastic, and is smeared across a hot bed, and then it then does another layer and so on. But it has to color it all in. Whereas with a resin printer, you print the whole layer in one go by exposing the resin vat to light, UV light, and the print bed then goes up back down into the resin again, and you expose the next layer. So with filament printing, the amount that you've got to print determines how long it's going to take. So it takes a very long time in some cases, especially with a big print. With resin printing, it's only the height of the print that determines how long it's going to take. So you could do a very complex model, and if it's quite shallow in the print area, then it will do it in a couple of hours.
That's amazing. So I think we are out of questions. I'll keep my eye open. What's next for you?
Well, I've been filling up my mantelpiece with movie props. So, I mean, as I say, I made the umbrella T-virus containers to test how transparent I could make clear resin, and I coloured the vials by using alcohol ink on the inside, so that's a solid piece of resin. And then I've started making other movie props. So I've got the head of the staff of Ra from Indiana Jones. And if you throw me the whip, I will throw you the idol. Let's see, what else have I got sitting on my desk here? So, yeah, Hunger Games. And obviously, some raffle prizes. This one's straight from Hutton, free Sidewinder. Anaconda, free Anaconda. And obviously on my stream, I introduced Brian the Terminator. I'll turn his eyes on here.
Goodness.
And he's life size. And when I say life size, is when I do the rest of his body, he'd be 6'3". But I'm going to quit while he's ahead.
Brilliant fish.
All right, yeah, I can see. Yeah.
What are you going to be doing with all these things once you've printed them? And how come you've not been killed by significant others?
I no longer have a significant other. But that's a whole other story. But no, I've been doing stuff for sort of friends and things. Like I said, the Fifth Element stones, which I'm now doing a set for myself. I did a set for a school friend of mine. I've been making Fallout props. Like I did, this is a Pip-Boy.
Oh, that's lovely.
But it's an Apple Watch charge stand. So you put the Apple Watch charger in the circle there, and you put the watch in. Well, you see, my watch is just, it slots in, and then when it goes on charge, the green time comes up on the Pip-Boy. So it just looks like a Pip-Boy. And I did have a painted one kicking about, but I think it's in my son's room now, actually being used. And I've been making other sort of movie props and things. It's Predator mask and so on. And so I'm filling up my mantle with bits and pieces. There's Judge Death and an alien xenomorph sitting on my modem over there, and lots of other bits and pieces. But I've also made tools as well. I mean, I've got a nut measuring tool there for sort of measuring bolts and nuts, so you can check stuff out. And I did a vacuum attachment for my father, and it's like a donut with a crosshair and a hole. And what you do is you put it on the end of a vacuum cleaner tube, and then you drill through it, and it just sucks up all the dust. So it doesn't make a mess. So it make my mother happy, because then my dad, when he's doing his little DIY projects, doesn't raise dust everywhere.
All right, now we're getting more questions in. Can you work from... Okay, this might be a setup. Can you work from a reference photograph?
I've done a little bit of 3D modelling, but not that much. Most of the models that I've printed, I've got from the internet and either added to them, mixed them up, or just printed them as is. Most of the creativity is sort of getting it printed and painting it and putting it all together.
I think Yorkie Lad's asking a similar question, which you've just kind of touched on as well, which is how easy is it to get the blueprints, and how easy did you find it to get into the 3D printing?
I did a bit of research before getting into it, which is why I chose resin over filament printing. The models, there's a lot of websites that give away free models, and there are a lot of other websites that sell models. So it's a bit like Etsy, but for models. So people can go and purchase models that other people have sold. The software that I use with the printer is a free package called Lychee, but the software that comes with the printer is called Chitubox, and they are both software for slicing a model, so turning a 3D object into a series of 2D bitmaps that then are the slices that make up the model. So if you imagine someone sort of taking a bacon slicer and taking the 3D model and reducing it to flat slices and then saving that into a print queue, that's basically what the slicer software does.
Unbelievable, isn't it? Just amazing. Goodness knows where it's going next. It's just, as I say, I think Ben's only interested once they start 3D printing pizza. That's what he said, isn't it?
I wouldn't try eating the resin because you'd be dead very quickly, but there's lots of other things you can print.
Well, thank you very much, Anthony, for that wonderful video and for giving us your time. And I know you've got a busy day ahead of you as well, so really appreciate you sticking around and coming in to answer questions.
Leg it from here and take apart a wardrobe.
Do you, well, okay, just out of because your family must see these things. What's the most unusual thing that they have tried to get you to 3D print? Just as a final question.
What's the most unusual thing that I've 3D printed? Ooh, I don't know. I mean, pass. No, I don't think I've had any requests where I haven't just gone, yeah, there you go. I mean, as I say, I did my son Pip-Boy. This week I did him a Nuka-Cola bottle. So a little sort of rocket-shaped bottle with a red top and Nuka-Cola label on it. And it's made out of black tinted clear resin. So it looks like a Coca-Cola bottle that's been drunk.
Oh, fantastic. All right, well, thank you very much for joining us. I will let you get away while you still can before any more questions come in. I think, yep, there's nothing else I can see. I think the problem, people are always talking about selling these things, but I think obviously when you're using other people's templates, it's not quite as straightforward as that. These are, crafts of love and for sharing in other ways. But thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, what else you got? Sorry,
thank you very much for having me.
I'm not going to cut you off. You had something to say. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say that the Patreon that I joined, where I got Brian from, they allow you to sell your models, not the designs, but the printed models for whatever you want. So if someone wanted me to build a complete Terminator and sell it to them, I could do that because that Patreon, the copyright on that does that one. That particular Patreon has this thing where they've been making the Baby Yoda statues, Grogu's, into all sorts of things. So there's a Thor Grogu, a Loki Grogu, a Pinhead Grogu, which is just awesome, and a Terminator Grogu, and all these sort of things. But I've got a very long list of things from that site that I want to print, one of which I've got to wait till this month to get, and that's the Fifth Element sarcophagus, which is the sort of the golden sarcophagus with the face screaming into the sky from the film The Fifth Element, to go with my other 4 element stones. So I'm kind of rubbing my hands to get hold of that one, and then I can finish the collection.
Fantastic. All right.
I think as well, Grant, the obviously the 3D printing community is kind of growing and growing and growing, and it's lovely to see that that Anthony's kind of picked up the torch in terms of the elite models and the other bits and pieces of movie props that are there, and you're also seeing communities, certainly during the lockdown period, getting together to print PPE stuff and ventilator equipment and other bits and pieces. So there are a vast array of ways in which the communities and the technology have kind of come together to provide solutions for things. I mean, knowing what size your screws and your nuts are is one thing, and then being able to to kind of do all those other things is tremendous. And it really does. There are kind of upsides and downsides. We could probably talk for a while about the environmental issues around plastic, but at the same time, when things can new tech can be used to create solutions that can save lives, and everything else, I think it just shows its essential quality in relation to modern living, modern needs, modern medical needs in particular, in terms of what's there. So yeah, no, I just wanted to add that in. I threw the question in about reference photographs, Anthony. Sorry, it's I've got a vast array of things here that I've built that I'd love to have 3D models of, and of course I'm rubbish with Autodesk Recap, so I can't make models of them, but I'm sure other people can do far better than I can with all of this stuff. So yeah, no, this looks fantastic.
I'm answering a question from Ben. And if I'm sorry, I didn't know if I was muted or not.
No, not yet. Not yet.
Yeah, so someone asked if I printed a multipass, and the answer to that one is yes. I've made a multipass that's exactly the right size for a UK driving license, because I did that for my friend who's got the Fifth Element stones.